Right now, you're warm, you didn't even have to try, a coat waits by your door. Nothing had to die to make it. Next week's food already sits safe in your kitchen. Not for them. Now strip all that away. Bare skin. Killing cold. That cold could kill you asleep before you even woke. This was simply normal, not one bad year, but every year. For hundreds of thousands of years, ancestors lived through real ice ages. Giant sheets of ice buried whole continents beneath them. That cold could kill a person in just a few hours. Somehow, every single one of them made it through. You're living proof. Every ancestor won that fight. Lose once and there's no descendant. No you. No today. So how did a hairless animal from Africa beat this cold? It's one of the greatest survival stories almost nobody knows. Almost nobody realizes how close we came to not making it at all. Winter back then was nothing like a cozy fire and a blanket. The last ice age peaked between 26,000 and 19,000 years ago. Radiocarbon dating. Ice buried Europe, Asia and North America under thick frozen sheets. Flat frozen land left nothing to block the howling wind. Trees vanished. Food disappeared for months at a stretch. Human bodies simply weren't built for weather like this. We evolved in warmth. Our biology never really caught up. No thick fur, no fat layer like a seal has. Unlike a bear, we can't just sleep our way through winter. Strip a person's clothes off in real cold, and hours remain. Mammoths carried built-in fur and fat for brutal winters. Cave bears simply slept the entire winter away. Reindeer just walked towards somewhere warmer instead. Humans had none of those natural advantages at all. On paper, humans should have died out first when the ice came. Wrong body, wrong place, the worst possible timing. But we had brains that plan, and hands that build. That combination barely turned out to be enough to survive. No single trick saved them. It took many, stacked together. Each fix solved one problem that would otherwise have killed them. Here's exactly how they managed to pull it off. Everything starts with fire. Nothing else works without it. Humans had already mastered fire for 300,000 years. By the Ice Age, fire wasn't extra. It was everything. Ukrainian fire pits reveal fireplaces built with real surprising skill. One ancient fireplace burned hotter than 600 degrees Celsius. Ukrainian excavation. That's hotter than 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. But wood didn't last forever out on the open, treeless steppe. When it ran out, people simply burned fat and bone instead. Therefore, fire became the whole survival kit at once. It warmed bodies, cooked meat, hardened tools, and stretched daylight through endless dark winters. But fire came with one brutal limitation nobody could fix. You couldn't fold it up and carry it across open, frozen land. Step just a few feet from the flames, and the deadly cold was already waiting there, patient and immediate. So humans reached for a solution no other animal on Earth had ever managed to pull off. They took the warmth right off other animals' backs and wrapped it around their own instead. At first it was crude and simple, raw skins draped loosely over bare, shivering shoulders. Cut marks on bear paw bones in northern Europe show something startling. Hunters were skinning bears for fur 300,000 years ago. Those bear hides became genuine winter cloaks, thick enough to block wind and shrug off freezing rain, but a loose hide has a fatal flaw. Heat leaks straight out through every open gap and seam. The real fix didn't arrive until around 30,000 years ago, and it was almost absurdly small. A tiny needle, carved from bone or ivory, no thicker than a matchstick, with a hole barely visible. One archaeologist called it, without exaggeration, maybe the single most important invention in human history, because a needle meant sewing, fitted clothing, sealed seams, garments actually shaped to a human body. Suddenly layers were possible, and sleeves that closed tight at the wrist, sealing cold air out entirely. A blanket draped over shoulders and a coat stitched to fit are two completely different worlds. Early modern humans likely had better fitting winter clothes than Neanderthals ever managed to make. That single clothing edge may explain something bigger, why our species outlasted theirs through the hardest winters. Deer hide, meanwhile, cut the wind beautifully, while staying soft enough to sew into warm mittens. The same tough deer hide, shaped and sealed right, also became genuinely waterproof winter boots. Before stepping into the cold, hunters rubbed animal fat tallow directly onto their bare faces and necks. That greasy layer sealed the skin, trapped body heat, and physically blocked wind from stealing warmth away. Simple, more than a little gross, and by every account, it genuinely worked. But bright winter snow hid a danger almost nobody thinks about today. Glare bouncing off endless white snow could actually blind a hunter within hours, so northern hunters carved thin, narrow slits straight into bone or wood. Tied snugly over the eyes, those slits became humanity's very first sunglasses. Everyone pictures cavemen cowering deep inside dark, damp caves, waiting out the storm. The real truth turns out to be far more impressive than that image. Plenty of people built their own shelters out on open treeless land instead. Across what's now Ukraine and Russia, there were no caves at all, and barely any wood. So they used the one raw material that was lying around absolutely everywhere, bone. At a site called Mezerich, people built entire round houses out of mammoth bone. Massive skulls and heavy leg bones went into the ground first, forming each house's base. Curved ribs and long tusks arched upward from there, bending into a complete roof frame. Some of these houses used literally hundreds of individual mammoth bones apiece. Builders sank each frame partway into the earth itself, anchoring it against brutal wind. Then hides, moss, and packed earth sealed the frame, trapping precious heat inside. The largest house at Mezerich dates back roughly 18,000 years, radiocarbon dating confirms. That exact site was reused, rebuilt, and lived in again for centuries afterward. It stands today as some of the oldest architecture archaeologists have ever uncovered. People, in other words, built entire homes out of long-dead Ice Age giants. Underneath the mammoth bone walls, the builders hid engineering nobody expects from an Ice Age hunter. Every dip in the floor, every angle served a purpose. Many winter homes used a clever cold trap doorway, sunk lower than the raised platform where the family actually slept each night. The doorway sat lower than the raised sleeping area, an intentional dip carved straight into frozen ground before a single hide was laid. Heavy cold air sank and pulled right there by the door, trapped in that low pocket instead of drifting further into the home. Warm air naturally rose up to where families slept, drawn by nothing but simple physics nobody in that hut could have named. They understood this physics millennia before anyone wrote it down, testing it by trial, cold nights, and the simple proof of who survived till morning. They also used snow itself as a genuine insulator, packing it thick around shelter walls like a blanket instead of fearing it as an enemy. Thick snow walls kept shelters near freezing, never colder, holding a steady temperature no matter how brutal the wind outside became. Even at 30 below outside, snow shelters stayed survivable, the packed white walls doing quiet work no fire ever could. Long before igloos, people knew snowbanks trapped real warmth, a discovery Arctic hunters would perfect generations after these first attempts. Forests blocked wind far better than open flat land, cutting the bitter gusts down to almost nothing among close-packed trunks. A forest walk in brutal weather felt shockingly calm, a hidden shelter nobody had to build, already standing since long before they arrived. Small gaps and drafts got packed with moss and mud, sealing every crack a cold wind might have slipped through. Sticky pine pitch sealed remaining cracks completely airtight. The same sap trees used to heal their own wounds, now healing a home's... Staying warm tonight matters, but hunger kills slower and surer, a quieter threat with no flame to fight it back. For months, almost nothing grew or wandered to hunt, the frozen land offering silence where summer once gave abundance. So they mastered saving food long before it ran out, turning short seasons of plenty into insurance against the empty ones. A big kill wasn't just eaten, it was preserved, planned for months before the first hungry week of winter even arrived. Cold itself did half the work, freezing meat naturally solid within hours, an icebox built entirely from the season trying to kill them. They smoked meat over low fires, dried it into tough strips of jerky, and preserved dried fruit for months when nothing fresh remained. Food went into dug storage pits and cool underground cellars, hidden beneath frozen ground where neither animals nor rot could reach it. Earth kept stores cold and safe through winter months, working like a refrigerator nobody had to invent, only dig. Some sank weighted mammoth meat into cold ponds instead, stones tied to hide bundles holding the meat safely below the surface. That pond became a strangely effective natural refrigerator, the near-freezing water keeping meat fresh for weeks at a time. If ingenuity like this keeps surprising you, subscribing means you won't miss what comes next, because the strangest trick is still ahead. None of this needed power, and nothing could ever break. No storm or outage able to spoil a single stored meal. Almost nothing from a carcass ever went to waste. Hide, bone, fat and sinew, all finding a second purpose beyond food. Every calorie got squeezed out. Unlike our modern habits. An entire animal honoured down to its very last scrap. Hunting itself was carefully organised, not left to chance. Entire groups moving together with a plan built from experience. In eastern France, hunters used a tall limestone rock as a trap, driving animals toward the one place with nowhere left to run. Fire and teamwork pushed entire herds toward that single spot, flames and shouting doing the work no lone hunter ever could. The same trap worked for tens of thousands of years, generation after generation, returning to the exact same stretch of stone. Kill big, dry the meat, save it before the cold. That single rhythm repeated every single year without fail. That single plan is most of the reason they survived. Not luck, not chance, just method sharpened winter after winter. Here's something easy for us to completely miss today. Buried under central heating and grocery store shelves. These people expected winter. Their whole year prepared for it. Every warm month spent quietly getting ready for the cold one. We're the ones who get caught off guard instead, surprised by a single snowstorm that would have barely registered back then. We just assume the power always comes back on, forgetting that warmth was never guaranteed for most of human history.
They were never once surprised by winter's arrival, because nothing about it was left to chance or hope. Preparing all year was simply the entire point of living, every warm season just winter's quiet rehearsal. They also survived by relying heavily on each other, since no single person could outplan an entire ice age alone. Far more people packed into far less space, deliberately, crowding together on purpose rather than out of misfortune. Body heat becomes real heat when people huddle close, turning a crowded shelter into the warmest place in the whole frozen world. Here's what nobody expects. Your own space wasn't comfort, it was a death sentence. Empty room around you meant nothing stood between your skin and the freeze. So the coldest nights had a pattern. It was almost always the isolated and the elderly who died first. The ones with no one sleeping close enough to notice. Without a body pressed against yours through the night, a hard freeze could kill you quietly in your sleep, and nobody would even know until morning. But don't picture the Ice Age as one big cooperative family. Cooperation kept people alive, yet life among these groups wasn't always peaceful. When food ran short enough, humans became a real threat to other humans. Scarcity didn't just test the weather, it tested trust between people. Archaeological evidence shows something harder to say out loud. Some ancient humans turned to cannibalism when there was simply nothing else left to eat. Starvation pushed people past every normal rule they had. When the food disappeared entirely, the most desperate measures became the only ones left. Centuries later, in the brutal winters of medieval Europe, peasants found a stranger solution. They brought their own livestock indoors to survive the cold. Cows and sheep moved onto the ground floor of the house, while the family slept on the level built directly above them. Animal bodies threw off a surprising amount of heat, and all of it rose straight up through the floor, warming the people sleeping overhead. Picture it, you're lying under hides on a cold night, and the warmth reaching you is coming from a cow breathing just below the floorboards. Sometimes the cold didn't just get outsmarted, it got absorbed into the body itself, and nowhere shows that better than the far south of South America. The Yagan people lived at the southern tip of South America in freezing conditions, and yet they wore almost no clothing at all. Their bodies simply ran hotter than ours, generating extra internal heat, so the cold that would drop us never touched them the same way. They also rested in a deep squatting position, arms and legs tucked tight against the body, cutting down how much warmth could ever escape. Their answer to winter was never sown from fur or lit as a fire. It was written straight into their own blood. Then there's the strangest survival idea of all. One that sounds almost made up. Some ancient humans may have survived winter by hibernating. At a Spanish site called the Pit of Bones, scientists studied human ancestors who lived through brutal cold around 430,000 years ago. Their bones carry strange damage that repeats in cycles, almost like clockwork, showing up season after season across their entire lives. Growth stopped and started again and again, a pattern that hints at teenagers not getting enough sunlight during long stretches of the year. That exact pattern shows up in animals that hibernate when the body slows down hard and starts quietly feeding on itself to survive. Some scientists suggest that without enough fatty food to last the winter, these early humans may have slowed their bodies into a kind of deep sleep. It's far from settled. Plenty of researchers argue the damage has other causes. If puzzles like this hook you, subscribe because ancient humans still have secrets left to explain. In a few thousand years we went from mammoth bone huts to a button that makes heat appear. Somewhere in that leap, we forgot winter was ever a war we could lose.